Hey there, woodworkers. Today I'll be making a ring. This is a really fun project that you can do, and it doesn't cost very much. What you need for this project is a ring core, a blank, and a waste block. I've got a stainless steel ring core, and I'll be using a red dyed and stabilized piece of maple. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I need to do is I need to sand and make sure that one of the faces of the ring blank is totally flat. I'm going to do that here on my vertical belt sander, but I don't want to get so close with my fingers, so I've just grabbed a scrap block to help. So I've got one face sanded nice and flat. Okay, now that I've got the ring blank sanded nice and flat, and I've got my waste block, I'm going to go ahead and glue this in place. I've seen other videos online where people use double-sided tape, and that can work well also, but I've seen success just using a little super glue. So all it takes is about a dime-sized circle of CA glue. I'm going to just kind of eyeball the center of that waste block and press it into place. Once I feel like I've got it where I want it, I'm going to give it a couple of sprays with some accelerator. And just wait for a minute or two for that to cure. Okay, I'm over here at the lathe, and I've just got my 4-jaw chuck here. I'm going to secure my waste block, and I'll give it a test spin and see, and just make sure that it's spinning true. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to bring my tailstock over as well. Just to provide a little extra support at the beginning of this project. I'll be using carbide scrapers for this whole project. So my first step is I'm just going to turn my blank and a little bit of my waste block down to round. Be careful as you're turning. Your ring blank is a pretty small piece of wood. And so if you're too aggressive, then any mishaps will probably ruin the entire blank. So just go nice and slow and controlled. Now that I've got it down to size a little bit, I'm going to back my tailstock off. Okay, my next step is I'm going to need a drill chuck for the tailstock. So I'm going to remove my tail center. Okay, so I've got a drill chuck, and I've got a little Forstner bit that is less than the diameter of my ring core. So I'm going to tighten this into place and load that up into my tailstock. I'm going to turn on my lathe and decrease the RPMs to under 1,000. I tighten my tailstock into place, but I leave the quill loose so that I can begin boring out this hole. If you see or smell smoke, just back it out, give it a little breath, and then you can continue. And go until you can feel a change, and once you start seeing shavings from your waste block, you know that you're done. So I'm done with the drill chuck, and now I need to make that hole a little bit larger so that my ring core can fit inside. Okay, I've got a boring chuck that is great for incrementally increasing the size of that hole for our ring. When you use this for the first time, then call me over and I'll show you how to set up to get our boring bit into this chuck. And I'm going to load that into the tailstock and bring the tailstock over. I'll tighten my tailstock down like before, and I'll just leave my quill loose. For this part, I'm going to go ahead and just remove my tool rest. And I've got a little hex wrench here, and as I rotate my boring bit to the left, then it is pulling that bit towards me. So I'm going to advance this closer to my ring, and I'm just going to turn until I can see that it is just going to be cutting into my ring blank. I'm also going to keep my ring core handy because I'll need to be checking each time to see when this is going to fit. We are hoping for a perfect fit. We don't want any looseness, but we also don't want to have to force it into place. So I'll keep in mind how far I need to go, and I still have quite a bit to drill out. So I'm actually even going to adjust my boring head just a little bit more. Okay, I'll turn it on, and again I've got my RPMs down below 1,000, and I'm just going to have a couple of fingers here steadying this so it doesn't spin around as I start boring. And I'm going to slowly start advancing the quill. Okay, you'll be able to see and hear and feel when you get to the end of that. Okay, so after each time, we're going to drop our ring in and see if it fits. So it's still not fitting quite yet, and I still have a decent amount. So at this point, I'm just going to do a half turn. So I'm going to turn, rotate that halfway, and try again. Get my ring core and try to fit that in as well. Another half turn. Okay, so, oh, that was lucky. That fits perfectly. So I got lucky there. Typically, it'll get to the point where it almost fits in, but maybe just needs one tiny little bit left. So when you get to the point that you feel like you're very close, then instead of doing a half turn on my adjustment, I would just do about 1/8 of a turn, just very, very slight. As I'm looking at the lines on my boring chuck, I would only be turning it like 1 or 2 little notches that represents 1/1000 of an inch. but it seems like we got this fitting just right. I'm going to back my tailstock up and give it a little closer inspection. Your ring blank is nice and hot right now, and so when I put the ring core inside and it heats up, it expands just a little bit. So it feels a little tight right now, but I think that is going to be a perfect fit. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to try to remove a little bit more of this blank material around it so that I have less work to do after I've glued this up. This ring is 5 millimeters wide, and so I'm going to measure starting from the end of my blank that's touching the waist block. I'm going to measure over from that, and I'll give myself maybe a couple of millimeters extra, so I'll mark it at 7 millimeters. But then the rest of this I can go ahead and turn down. Okay, I'm going to continue this line. Okay, so I have about 3/16 of material that I can remove from the right side of my ring blank. I'll do this with the tailstock away still. And now that we've removed some material and we're getting fairly small, just make sure, like I said, to do very light cuts. But you can turn your RPMs back up. I'm at 1800, 1900 or so. I'm just going to carefully remove some of this material. You can kind of match up your ring core and see how close you're getting. It's kind of a fine balance. The more I remove now, the easier it is, and the less sanding that I'll need to do. But if I take off too much, obviously, then that's a problem as well. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Now, looking at my ring core, I could also remove another 1/16 or so, or 1/8 of an inch from the outside diameter. So I'll do that as well. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at now. Okay, there's a couple of ways that I can cut this off since I've super glued it on. I could use a parting tool, would be a great option, and just take it very, very lightly until that ring core just comes off. Or another option, if you're not comfortable parting the blank off, is creating yourself a little mark and then sawing it off with a handsaw. So I'm going to show that example. I'm going to sort of give myself a spot for my saw to go, and I'll be using my diamond-shaped carbide tool. And I'm just going to make a little indentation. I've made just a little groove right at the end of the ring core, and so that will help me to have somewhere for my saw to begin. Now I'll remove the tool rest, and I just have a handheld dovetail saw. rotate it a little bit. I'm going to use my locking pin just to keep that from rotating as I'm cutting the rest off. There's my ring core. Still have a little bit of that waste block material on the other side, so I'm going to sand that off. Typically, I would just use a parting tool to cut that off, but I just wanted to show another example of a way you could do it if you're not comfortable doing that. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of sanding, and then this will be ready to glue my ring core into place. Okay, so I still have a little bit of my waste block material on here, and I need to sand that down just slightly. So I'm actually going to use some double-sided tape now and tape my ring to this scrap board so that I can safely take it over to one of my power sanders and sand that off. So I'll stop there because I've gotten all the way down to my ring blank. So now I'm ready to go over and glue my ring core into place. Okay, I'm double checking the fit again, and this just fits perfectly. It is a snug fit, but it doesn't take pressure to push it into place, but there's no space around between the ring core and the ring blank. To get a better glue contact, I'm going to use some sandpaper and just scuff up and put some scratches on the outside of this ring core. Okay, I've scuffed that, and now I'm ready to glue it in place. You could use a scrap board, or I'm using a little scrap of melamine. You could also use wax paper, but you just don't want to glue your ring to your table. I'm going to take my CA glue and just put just a very small drop is all that it takes, and I'll use my Q-tip to transfer that all the way around. And maybe I need one extra little drop. And then I'm just going to fit that over my ring core. That should be just perfect. And since I was careful, I don't have a bunch of excess glue to clean up. So I'm just going to give that a spray. And wait for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to need to, I've got about, I don't know, 1.5 millimeters. I probably could have removed more on the lathe. So I've got a little bit of sanding that I need to do to get this down so that this side is flush with my ring core. The other side this one's done, but this side just needs a little bit of sanding on this edge to get it flush to my ring core. I can do that sanding by hand. That's probably the most controlled way to do it and the safest. But it is going to take me several minutes to sand through that. Okay, I have finished prepping my ring blank and ring core. So both sides are totally flush, and I still have some material to go remove. So now we're going to go back to the lathe. Okay, so I've prepared my ring. Now I'm going to use what's called a ring chuck, and this just threads onto the headstock. In my turning supplies, I have a little tote that's labeled with the sizes of bushings. So for this ring, I'm going to use the smaller set of bushings, and I'm going to put that on our ring chuck, and then the ring, and then the other one, so that those chamfers are facing towards the ring and holding it in place. Now I'll bring the brass fastener over and tighten that up. So my ring core is sticking up just above these bushings, but this is going to allow me to finish turning this ring. I'm going to bring my tailstock over just for some added support. Now my ring is only 5 millimeters wide, and the blank is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to be removing it until almost all that blank is gone, so that it's a nice thin ring. But at this point, I am extremely careful on my cut because I do not want that blank to come off of that core. So I'm just going to carefully remove some material. I probably still have about 1.5 millimeters. So I'm just going to keep going just a little bit. Okay, I've got that down to about 1 millimeter, and I like to have it a little bit rounded. And so now I'm just going to knock down these edges just ever so slightly. Okay, I like what I'm seeing, and so now I'm going to switch to my sandpaper. This is a fairly clean cut, so I'm actually just going to start with probably 320, but you could start at 220 if you have some tool marks or things like that that you need to work out. I'll remove my tool rest. And for this example, I'm going to start at 320, and I'll also do 400, and I'm going to stop there. But you could continue up higher than that grit if you would like to. This is very delicate, so it really doesn't take much. But I'm trying to get the sides and trying to round off the top just a little bit. You can do it however you want. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So the last thing to do is to add some finish. There's different types of finishes you can use. I'm just going to use one of my favorites, which is friction polish. Okay, so I've got my friction polish and I've got a t-shirt rag, and I'm just going to wet that rag a little and manually spin some of this on. And then I'll turn the lathe on to apply some friction. About 30 seconds or so, or till I feel like it's dry. And then I'm going to switch to a dry spot on my rag and just buff it out. And you can do as many coats as you'd like. Similar to a pen, probably want to do 5 or 6. I think for this example, I'm just going to do 3 coats. Okay, this is feeling pretty dry and it's looking nice and shiny, so I'm probably done. I'll remove my tailstock and get this off of the ring chuck. And there is my finished product. It's looking really nice. Turned out like a nice red color. Okay, I'm going to spend a few minutes cleaning up everything that I've used during this project. And then I'm ready to give this away to someone that it would actually fit. All right, I've finished my ring and I'm happy how it turned out. This was a really fun project. And it's always fun to do different sizes and colors. They make great gifts and they're fun to wear. See you next time.